Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Picking Bones. This is the first episode of Talking Bones. This is going to be the show where we just have more casual conversations with any guest I want, and we talk about anything I want. And today we're talking about storytelling with our guest James over from Narrative Spirituality. Uh, and we're just going to talk about stories, and we're going to let him start off by introducing himself and kind of how he got into looking into these sorts of things. So, James, welcome to the show. And
Thanks for having me on, Eric.
yeah, no problem.
Cool. So to start, kind of want to give my testimony, my conspiracy truther testimony, I guess. I started with, I think maybe some people have read C.S. Lewis, and I think C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. Were you ever familiar with this before? Have you heard of the name?
I've heard of it, but I've never dug too much into Lewis. Lately, I'm wanting to study more Lewis and Tolkien, as they seem like some of the last great Christian storytellers.
Indeed. And I was like a really big fan of Lewis. Several years ago, I was reading all of his books and whatnot, and then I didn't even know about this trilogy. And I think maybe it's even been hidden from society a little bit because it reveals a lot. And the second book is actually just so happens to be my favorite novel. It's called Paralandra.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. So the third book is really filled with conspiracy, and I didn't really know it when I was reading it. I just thought it was kind of interesting storytelling, interesting ideas, and he gets it, I think, from. So he was friends with J.R. Tolkien, and they had a third friend.
Well, they had like a whole writing group called the Inklings
Right.
at Oxford or Cambridge. I can't remember which. But
Mhm.
they would get together and discuss storytelling and all sorts of things.
Cool. So the third Inkling was the third of the biggest ones
Mm-hmm.
was a guy who had gotten involved in the occult, and then he couldn't quite go with everything they were telling him, and so he abandoned ship. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think C.S. Lewis got a lot of ideas for his third book. It's the biggest one. It was a little slow, but after I pushed through it for a year, I finally got through it. And and then, like I said, I didn't really think it applied too much to the real world. I wasn't like blown away. But then I I remember my friend really wanted to see Interstellar. And do you happen to like Christopher Nolan films? I want to like them, but I never do.
I think he's a good. Uh, he makes good films. I would say. I
Okay.
don't. I don't love all of them as much as some people do. I didn't really like Interstellar. I'll say
Okay.
that.
Cool. Cool. So generally, I don't like them as much as I want to, and I just feel drained and depressed after watching them. And but my friend really wanted to see Interstellar, and and also I saw on the posters the philosophy that it's arguing is man was born here, they were not meant to die here. We were born here, we were not meant to die here. Basically, just not a Christian understanding
Mhm.
of humanity. Um, and C.S. Lewis argues against this philosophy of going into space in his space trilogy. That's what it's all about. All the bad guys want to go to space to save humanity uh, because they don't hope in God saving us and Revelation and whatnot. And um, and Christopher Nolan's film, it's really pushing this hard. Like we're going to save the human race by going into space because obviously we all know that Earth has some sort of expiration date. We can't just sit around here forever,
Mhm.
indefinitely. And so that I already had in mind C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy because I knew they were against each other, but I finally caved into watching it. And there was a scene where I got so shocked that I paused the film and I looked at my friend. I was like, "Are you seeing this? Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" And he's like, "What?" So in the scene, the there's this character Cooper, and in the film he's the pilot, and NASA's trying to recruit him, and NASA's gone underground. They're secretive now, so there's a secret organization trying to recruit a talented individual.
Is this
And
McConaughey's character?
yes,
Okay.
um, and they inform him. It's particularly the moment they started talking about the others, what they called the others. And they said, he's like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, whatever they are, they're looking out for us. And then that's when I paused the film, and there was a scene that was very similar to that in the third book in C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. There's a talented character, Mark, and it gets to the point where he learns too much in an organization, and they decide, like, okay, like, we can't just let him go. We either need to fully initiate him or kill him. And he could be pretty useful, so maybe it would be good to fully initiate him. And then, so one of the characters, Frost, he's one of the higher ups, the managers of this organization. And in this book, it's like a think tank group. And instead of a pilot, Mark is a writer, but still you have this talented individual. And the manager, Frost, sits him down and he tells him his options. He's like, okay, but you can either fully join us or we'll execute you. And you can, yeah, you can, it's like, it won't be painful or anything, but these are your options. And Mark's like, okay, well, I guess I'll hear what you're all about. And so Frost says, okay, I'll fill you in. He says, you've probably not heard of the macrobes. And Mark's like, microbes? Yeah, I know what microbes are. And he's like, no, I didn't say microbes. I said macrobes. So yeah, the microbes they've caused all these things throughout human history, but we didn't know the cause of things like sicknesses until we invented the microscope. And he says, I have now to inform you of another discovery, that there are entities that are above the level of animal life. And we have now come in contact with them, and they're what is guiding this organization. And this organization is the organ of cooperation between the two species. And then it eventually gets to the point where he's like, okay, I'll go along with this. So they're these entities that they're describing in C.S. Lewis's book. They're obviously demons, but this organization is describing them in sort of just atheistic terms, from an atheistic understanding, that they're just anomalous entities, and they're guiding the organization, and they're helping save humanity. And these organizations have the same goals. In C.S. Lewis's book, the bad guys, again, they want to go to space to save humanity. And then it gets to the point where Mark, he has to go through on a few rituals, a few tests. So he sits in a room with like a painting that's difficult to look at. It's kind of ugly and whatnot. And there are a few different things. And then they're like, okay, it's the final test. You pass this, you'll be one of us. And they bring out like an icon of Christ or like a crucifix or something. I can't remember, but they said, all right, you have to spit on this, and then that's it. You'll be one of us. And Christianity is kind of it's more subtle, but now it comes right up front. And Mark, he's not exactly a Christian, but he's like, wait a second, I don't know if I'm ready for this yet. I haven't really thought this through. And so it gets more overt in Mark's situation. And let's see. So yeah, when I saw Interstellar, I was like, this is crazy. These organizations must be real. Like they're talking about the same thing, many decades apart. And so that made the film much more interesting to watch from there on out, to see to see further actions with these entities and what they are and whatnot.
Yeah, and that is absolutely fascinating. I need to read that space trilogy. Wow. Because so much of my work has been focused on pointing out how all these occultists and groups are contacting entities and channeling from these entities that they believe are trying to help mankind, help us to reach our true potential. And yeah, that's fascinating. And I had forgotten that these entities existed in Interstellar. I think I kind of started to check out because I really wasn't digging it. It had kind of a feel of like 2001, I guess, which is just getting it felt like it was less about the characters and more about certain ideas, and I didn't dig their ideas, so I stopped paying attention. But like, I obviously missed was missing some of what was going on there, and we see this obviously in all sorts of stories where we have higher entities trying to kind of guide humanity, and Yeah, so it's interesting to see some of the other stories that do this. Over on your website, you've got some analysis of some video games and different stories, and you did one of the Katy Perry music videos is all about what is the name of that song? Is it just E.T. or
Yep.
uh, yeah? And it's about like, could you be a devil? Could you be an angel? And it's about
Mhm.
this entity that she's talking with. Um,
And it's crazy. I remember I was like, I want to try to understand this video and break it down because I think there's a lot of stuff to it. And by the way, just a little tidbit. I remember I was so I live in the Republic of Georgia now, and so I made my escape. And let's see. And there's a recent Orthodox saint here, Saint Gabriel. And I was reading his teachings. I was like, well, I'm in Georgia. I might as well read about a recent Georgian saint. And he talked about the greatest. He said the greatest temptation will be salvation from the. He said, um, well, at first I was just scrolling through his teachers and I saw in bold. He said, "Antichrist has already been born." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Okay, well, you can't just accept everything you see on the internet, even if it's from um, perhaps from a holy man and whatnot." But and then I kept reading through it, and then he said, "The greatest temptation during the Antichrist times will be anticipation of salvation from the cosmos, from extraterrestrials, which are actually the demons." And um, yeah, and he says that there will be humanoids and whatnot, and like that. When he said that, it just immediately registered with me because I saw that in Interstellar, salvation from the cosmos. There are these other things out there that are going to save us,
mhm.
and that's in Katy Perry's ET. Um, and so when you watch the video, it opens up with just this apocalyptic world. The world has ended, but there's a robot guy, and he so someone has survived by transporting their consciousness to a robot, and robots can last longer than humans. Like if a body part, they don't get old and wrinkly and decompose, and if they do, you can just replace the parts. And that's the hope of um, a lot of people, a lot of atheistic salvation. And again, there's this entity. If you break down the video, if you watch it, Katy Perry is this alien, and she comes down um, and brings him to life, and more in a higher sense. And so
Mhm.
it's again salvation from the cosmos. And this was pretty interesting um, when I was trying to figure out that video. Another Christian friend of mine sent me uh, a video by Graham. So she's turning into different entities throughout the video. It's very cryptic. It's hard to break down at first, which is why I wanted to understand it. And I think the propaganda is supposed to work on a subconscious level. You're not supposed to understand consciously what you're watching.
Mhm.
Uh, and so Katy Perry starts off as a gray alien, and she turns into different entities like a fairy, and she turns into a, and then when she's falling, she looks like a fallen angel. She turns into a pagan goddess, and then and then at the end, her skirt flies away, and she has antelope legs. So she's kind of this spirit creature, this demon spirit creature that demons manifest a lot of times with animal legs like
Mhm.
that, like goat legs or whatnot. And Graham Hancock, this video my friend sent me, as I was trying to understand this video, he's not coming at it from a Christian perspective, but he's looking at it and he says that um, he said from my research, the entities that Americans call aliens, people have like alien visitations in their bedroom or whatnot. Um, and they get supposedly abducted. He said that shamans have these experiences, but the entities that they see have like hoofed legs, and they're more like your understanding of a spirit with part animal, part man, horns, hairy goat legs, and whatnot. And then the medieval Europeans called them fairies. And this is really interesting. I just remembered in C.S. Lewis's in the third book, there are these working with organization are these little or these elf creatures, and elves
Huh.
are similar to fairies, and the main character, there's like a fairy police force, and they're a little, they can kind of pass as humans. They're a little shorter. They have kind of pointy ears, um, and there's actually like martial law, like this think tank organization takes over a part of the country. And so he has like martial law takeover, and this is what Mark learns about, and he tries to run away, but they capture him, and then they try to initiate him.
Mm-hmm.
When and then so you have like an alien invasion before the understanding of a gray alien came, because before there were fairies, demons appeared to us with a certain mythology of the understanding of the people of the time, at a time that was fairies, and now they've developed a mythology of the
Yeah.
gray alien.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. And you can look at like Crowley's writing, and like he draws the lamb, which looks like exactly like our modern depictions of grays. And H.G. Wells, I think, is the one who popularized the look of the grays, and he was talking about what humanity would become in the future. And like so the idea of his idea of these sort of gray entities are kind of ascended humans with these really big brains, and they don't need to get nutrition. They don't have to like eat food anymore. I think they just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like roll around in like goo pile, like these like pools of goo that are like nutrient pools. um really weird stuff, but that seems like it's where this gray idea came from, and which ties into, yeah, it's this idea that is they are ascended men trying to guide mankind. uh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Indeed. And it's kind of interesting. My friend pointed out that it's kind of satanic. It's kind of like how everything, there's variety in God's creation, but so, the devil removes all the beauty and variety. And like, if you, the gray alien is a good example of this. It's kind of like my friend pointed out that it's like when women get a lot of boats, all the supermodels look the same. They get the same nose jobs. They get um, they get their lips done or whatever, and then they all just kind of blend together, the same look. And it's the gray alien is a removal of all features. Um, and it's kind of funny. I think it's ironic that in Starcraft, this is one of the games we've talked about. Um, the so the Protoss, there's like the Light Templar representing kind of the church and Christianity, and the Dark Templar representing occultists, and they're kind of the good guys. They're the persecuted victims. And the Dark Templar, their criticism of the light is that everyone's the same and it doesn't allow free expression and it's boring. But actually, the demonic, but actually the darkness, it's the gray aliens themselves are all the same. They have, you can hardly tell them apart, and it's actually the devil that makes everything look the same and just kind of removes everything good.
Hmm. Yeah, and StarCraft was like my favorite game growing up, actually. And when
Me too. I
so
would wake up before school, 5 o'clock in the morning, um,
yeah, I
every
definitely
day.
skipped school some days to play StarCraft. So like when I like started getting into conspiracy theory and like studying all this stuff, I I like started to see it inside of StarCraft, and I didn't really understand what was happening. But like StarCraft is very clearly about a lot of this stuff. It even has, if you scroll in on some of the maps, there's like the shops, like you're playing on like a broken world, and so some of the human shops, you see the shop signs, and one of them says FED, Global Elite Control, and then it has a Freemasonic, like the square and compass symbol
Wow.
above it. And so like I remember I made this post, and it was just like I figured it all out, guys. Like it's all about this conspiracy, and StarCraft is like talking about it. And like the first game, in StarCraft 2, like it was a trilogy.
Hmm.
And so you've got
Did
Wings
did
of
you did
Liberty.
you play did you play it all?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool.
I've definitely I'm a complete nerd. I've played through way too many video games, but now we can analyze them and do something useful with it at least.
Yeah, indeed,
uh,
indeed.
and so the first game, Wings of Liberty, though, in the sequel, is all about fighting for freedom, fighting against government tyranny, this corrupt
Mhm.
government, and
Kind of it's almost good. It kind of lures you in, kind of like gets the
Mhm,
population kind of invested in the story, and then the second and the third game in particular, then they start laying on the heavy propaganda, the spiritual messages.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I don't think there wasn't anything so blatant with like the spirituality in the first couple games. But yeah, and by the third part of StarCraft 2, they were just like all out pushing this kind of uh, demonic message. But in the first game, we did see like an example of a false flag attack, kind of where Manx
Hmm.
kind of used the psi emitter to lure the Zerg to this planet. Uh, but it's really this corrupt government that's leading the attack on the planet, essentially. Um,
And don't forget the. I remember like it just when I started seeing this. So I remember the big thing. I played through the original series again, and what I started seeing was that I remember someone talking about the philosophy of the illuminate the that there's it's dualism in a sense of like you gotta mix good and evil, light and dark. You got to mix all these things, and you in chaos and order. That's a big one. Uh, and you see this in what is it? You see it in a big one is Tron.
mhm,
There's the created guy, Clue, I think, and he wants to make the perfect system. So he's obsessed with order, kind of like God. He has all these laws, and then there's the counterpart and the real guy, and he looks out in the chaos and he's like, chaos, it's beautiful, and he's the hero. So the devils represents chaos and all that stuff, and then they have to unite, and then it's kind of like a suicide. He unites himself with the perfect guy at the end, and then it opens up like freedom that people are able to escape the Tron world, and the perfection guy is defeated. And this one guy, Theophilus Most Excellent. Uh, I'm Orthodox, and he's not too into that. He's like he's all in Protestant and stuff. But he made a really good video on this, and he talked about all these movies you can see this. And then I saw it in Starcraft, um, and it's it's so this is pretty crazy. It starts off. I didn't even realize this until later. I didn't know what like. I just thought it was just a coincidence picking a name just for the sake of it. But you start off the Protoss campaign in Antioch,
mhm,
and there's this. Everyone's talking about this, um, and like there's so many little names that I didn't know like
on the
Conclave.
Protoss, they're called the
Yeah,
Templar. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't even that didn't even register until just recently.
Mhm,
So and then conclave what that means is like the inner circle of the Vatican. I did not know what the conclave was. I just thought it was a random name. But that's who you work for in this game, the conclave at first. And everyone's talking about this, messianic figure who just died. They're lamenting his death, um, and everyone's complaining about the Dark Templar, who end up being not so bad, supposedly. And then you learn that the Dark Templar are necessary to defeat to defeat the Zerg in the campaign. That you actually need to appreciate the darkness.
mhm,
And then to defeat the Overmind, Tassadar. And it turns out that the messianic figure, Adun, he mixed the light and the dark in himself to save the Dark Templar. The Conclave claimed he was trying to attack the Templar. And so it's kind of like the occultists saying it's like a Gnostic Jesus. It's like he's not who the church says he is. He's actually like a Gnostic, kind of like Gospel of Thomas type thing.
mhm,
And Tassadar follows in his footsteps and unites the light and dark in himself and crashes the carrier ship into the Overmind. and that's how you defeat the Zerg. And then the second game, they just do the same story again. This the same message is just hammered. Like you have to get this light crystal and this dark crystal and bring them together, and at the top of a pyramid.
Yeah.
And they're not, there's not an explanation. They're just like, this is how it is. And then the conclave is freaking out the whole time. They're like, what, you want to work with the heretics? You like, and they're just going crazy. But they're portrayed as bad guys, like
Right.
just
The conclave is
hindering
obviously
progress.
corrupt. Mm-hmm.
And then the enlightened people are like, you fool, like we're patient with you long. And so you have to be patient with the conclave, and you're supposed to get really annoyed with them. And then eventually it comes to terms where you have to fight them openly and to get this to pass. And then at the end of the expansion pack, Brood War, the Protoss campaign, it's the climax. All the Zerg are closing in on this pyramid, and you have to bring the light crystal. And then your hero, the hero character of the Protoss, what's his name? Artanis, yep. So he's with this the leader of the Dark Templar, the matriarch, and she's decked out in like this shaman witch attire, and they start ascending this pyramid. They each have their crystals. She has the dark crystal, which you had to retrieve at some point in the game. He has the light crystal, and then he has all these facial expressions that come up, and because they reach the top of the pyramid. And if you look at the video, at first he's like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I should do this. And then he's like, and then there's an explosion outside with the battle going on. All the Zerg are coming in, and he looks and he's like, oh no, the situation's desperate. And then his facial expression changes to like, it's the only way. And then he like gets this look of determination, like, I'm gonna do it. And then they come in and they bring the crystals together. Big explosion kills all the Zerg, and the day is saved.
Now, there's something in the second game. At some point, there's this demonic force called Amon, and he's trying to infest kind of the Protoss, and they have like a direct connection to their like spiritual force called the Kala, and and at some point in the game, all of the Protoss have to, because this demonic force has like got into the Kala, they have to sever their connection to the Kala. Now, I don't really understand the connection of the noose or like the concept of the noose in Orthodoxy yet. I'm wondering if there's something there where it's like they have to cut off their spirituality on some level. If like, I don't know if there's something there with that.
And I actually think that might be what the Mark of the Beast does. And just to cue in the audience, we've talked about this, but Amon really resembles the Christian God in a lot of ways. He is sort of the creator of the Protoss, and he says, when you confront Amon, he says, "Behold your God," and the Kala is the spirituality it kind of resembles the High Templar, not the Dark Templar. The Dark Templar cut themselves off from the Kala. That's why they're heretics. And the Kala is, let's see, it's this force that binds the Protoss, and it's the spirituality of the conclave, kind of represents the church, and it's sort of either the Holy Spirit or the grace of God, something like that. And let's see, and I think that might, what cutting off the cords, just my theory is that might be the mark of the beast. That might be because that's portrayed as like the final moment in the Bible, and this is a huge decision that they all hesitate to do. And then this God figure, he is the one who created the Kala, and the Dark Templar, instead of the Kala, they get their power from the Void. And it's funny, at first they're like, we need both, we got to mix them both together. And then at the end of Starcraft 2, it suddenly changes to, well, there's this this villainous god who's filling the Kala and controls it, and he's taking full control of it now. And so everyone has to cut themselves off from the Kala and become Dark Templar. and this needs to be forced on everyone. And then at the end, Artanis makes a speech at the very end of the game where he's like, the Kala was supposed to unite us, but in the end, all it brought was bigotry and persecution, and it caused division. So now everyone needs to cut themselves off from the Kala, and then they're able to defeat Amon this way. And it's funny, it's interesting. Amon, he sort of becomes incarnate like Christ. And you have to kill the incarnate Amon. So so the Protoss are spiritual. The Zerg are more fleshly.
Mm-hmm.
They're animalistic. And the Protoss, like when they die on the battlefield, they dissipate like mist, like smoke. They have glowing eyes. They don't have orifices. They're kind of like elves or fairies in that sense. And in some depictions, kind of. And so they're like spirits almost, and it makes sense that the gray aliens are demonic manifestations, and then the Zerg are more fleshly, and the goal of Amon is to kind of mix the two and create a perfect being. So again, he's obsessed with perfection, and this reminds me of C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. One of the complaints of the demons, where they say one of the reasons we rebelled against God is we didn't like the idea of this creation of mixing the animal and spirit, what we are. The Protoss, they also don't like that, the mixing of them. And so, and Amon says he's creating these things in his image, these hybrid creatures in his image. That's a very interesting phrase, because humans, we have spirit, we have some animal, and we're in the image of God. And Amon creates this hybrid creature in his image, and then he becomes incarnate as one of these creatures, and you have to kill him, which is...
I hadn't thought of like Amon as the Christian god, but in terms of he is the creator of the Protoss, who their whole structure is named after the Christian church, basically. And it is about kind of going into this idea of balance and how you need both. And then towards the end, is it even about balance? It's just more like outright darkness, which I would kind of say we see in the actual occult. Like they like to talk about balance, but then you look at at the high levels of the occult and what they're doing, and it's just outright evil. It's just like human sacrifice and these sorts of things. There's no balance there. It's just pure evil. Yeah.
Indeed. And this is pretty interesting. You remember how, and just to clarify, for those who are fans of the game, who have played it, so understanding what the Kerrigan's role was confusing, but I figured it out. So the Amon was part of a race of beings called the Zelnaga, right?
Yep.
And how they create the next generation of Zelnaga. They basically have this being of perfect form and perfect essence, and they're supposed to grow up and then eventually unite on their own. Amon is portrayed as evil because he personally tried to get involved and make them in his image, whereas the Zelnaga just wanted it to kind of do its own thing, and that's just precedent. So that's what's good. Therefore, Amon is evil for whatever reason. And so the Zerg, Amon had messed with the Protoss, he had messed with the Zerg, and so they had been corrupted. And so what Kerrigan had to do to become a Zelnaga at the end was she had to become the pure Zerg, the primal Zerg, which had not been corrupted by Amon's influence.
Mm-hmm.
And the humans are already the natural progression of what the Protoss would have been. They're like the version of the Protoss, the being a perfect, whatever they were, perfect form or perfect essence, I can't remember. But they were basically humans are the Protoss. They have psionic abilities and technology. So she ascends through technology, psionic abilities. And then she mixes with the primal Zerg. So she mixes these two things without Amon's influence, and she becomes a Zelnaga goddess.
She
And
ascends into godhood.
yeah,
They
and
literally like are talking about her like she's a god by the end of her storyline. It's very
yeah,
weird.
and then what's interesting is you have this, and then she kills Amon. So like for good, not just the incarnate Amon. She like finishes the job in the void, and then this is interesting. You're always concerned about James Raynor and his love interest. You want that to kind of work out, and I thought this was kind of funny in the third game. James Raynor is in a battle, and and then one of the Protoss says, "Death is the end of all soldiers," and James Raynor says, "This isn't finished yet." And I'm like, James Raynor, what are you talking about? You think you're not going to die? Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, yes, you're going to die, even if you don't die in war. And then, but it's funny, the Zelnaga live for so long, it's kind of like eternal life. And in the end, he marries this god Kerrigan and enters into paradise with her. And I think that's kind of like a replacement of the hope of um, the marriage between Christ and the church. We have this union with a higher being, God, which gives us eternal life. We have a higher state of existence, and we have some sort of fulfillment. Kind of, you get a shadow of fulfillment in marriage, and it's one of the things that you live for. You don't just wander around life aimlessly. And so, what are your ultimate goals? Why do you get a job? It's so you can eventually get married. It's a very important thing. And so it's a sort of a false hope for this. James Raynor attains salvation. He attains union with a higher entity on a very profound level, and he gains eternal life in a sense. And all this stuff. So he marries a goddess, and um, so and then there's the same thing with Katy Perry's ET. This robot guy, he's brought to a higher state of living, and then he marries Katy Perry, this higher alien goddess being, and she's in the form of a goddess when she does this, when she brings him to life. And so he has eternal life, the marriage scene. It's again this false hope of attaining what Christianity offers.
Hmm. Hmm. And the idea is that we should just accept the teachings of these entities, and they will go hand in hand with us and raising us up into these ascended beings, and we can all become ascended beings like Amon. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be under Amon or under God. We can become like Amon ourselves. Is ultimately.
And on that note, they're deceptive. And even in StarCraft, the good Zelnaga, there's this random scene that comes from nowhere. You remember the Zelnaga that was in the final level when Kerrigan is going to defeat Amon? There's this Zelnaga who's like imprisoned by him.
That it got
Remember
pretty
the
bad.
Zelnaga? Yeah, the Zelnaga who gives like his power to Kerrigan when she becomes a goddess.
Okay.
This octopus guy, he like gives his power to her.
Okay.
Um, and so one of these beings is still left. Amon killed most of them, but there's one he keeps in prison. Totally reminds me of in the game. It comes out of nowhere. They're just like putting details in for no reason.
Hmm.
So it totally reminds me of the devil, Satan, being trapped by God in prison. He's in prison now, but then he'll be released at the end times. So you go and you release this being, and so Kerrigan has attained both these essences of perfect form, perfect essence, but to complete it, he needs to Zelnaga needs to give his essence to her. And so they when you enter into the void, this other dimension, whatever, on the outskirts of the universe, um, like out of nowhere, you release this being, and it reminds me of like the beast coming out of the sea or something. He just kind of rises out of this darkness, and also he pretends to be he's deceptive. He had pretended to be the dead Tassadar. Remember,
Hmm.
Zeratul thought that he was talking with Tassadar's ghost, and you think that Tassadar has found eternal life or something. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that part.
Yeah, and so it's like you think your buddy. It's kind of funny. It's like you think your buddy Tassadar is alive. He found eternal life, and it's kind of happy. And it's like, nope, Tassadar might just be gone, and that was a lie. He's like he says, and everyone's cool with it. He just says like, oh yes, to make you more comfortable, I appeared in the form of Tassadar, the ghost of Tassadar, so that you would trust me and that you would follow my advice. And then everyone just goes along with it. It's like they don't care that they just got manipulated and deceived. And that's a strategy of demons to appear as ghosts, which is really interesting. And because they don't go with the demonic too much in Interstellar with that interpretation, but it's obvious what it is. But you have this girl who she sees a ghost. She thinks there's a ghost in her bedroom. Then she thinks it's her. It turns out in the story it's her deceased father who's giving her a message. And it's kind of witchy what she does. Like she's getting like dust falls on the floor in patterns and books fall off the shelves and she's trying to interpret it. It's very witchy and it's kind of like poltergeist almost. And it's interesting. So she thinks it's her. It turns out in the story it's her father. That itself is very deceptive propaganda. And then, do you know the movie Contact?
I haven't watched it, but I know of it. Yeah.
So, and it's based off a book. And my friend watched it. And there's a girl who she thinks she's contacting her deceased father. So again, you have this deceased relative that you're trying to contact. Like in Starcraft, it's Tassadar, and then she goes and tries to find where this signal is coming from or something, and she meets this entity, and it's actually an alien. And he's like, "Yeah, I was appearing to you as your father to make you more comfortable with this conversation, with coming in contact with me." And then you have my friend pointed out that these women are like the Oracle of Delphi. In particular, we went and saw Interstellar together. So this guy, this friend of mine, he had also read the space trilogy, so he knew what I was talking about with Interstellar.
Yeah.
And then after this, after that, we had to go watch Arrival when it came out. And you have this woman who, she is this intermediary between the entities and humanity. Kind of like the Oracle of Delphi was the intermediary. Back then, it wasn't aliens; it was the god Apollo, who had messages for humanity, for the Greeks, and there were particular things about it: how to be a virgin woman, to be possessed as well by this entity, and
the beast of the pit is of course called Apollyon. So it's like this stuff. All this stuff is talking about the same thing. Both in ancient mythology, which is another form of storytelling, really. I thought of it when you mentioned fairies. It's like, yeah, that was just their form of storytelling of demonic propaganda. Now it's just kind of, it looks different today, but they're still pushing the same stuff. Sorry, I kind of cut you off there, though.
No, it's all good. And yeah, there was one more thing. My friend just mentioned it's vaguely there. It doesn't have to make sense. So long as there's some subconscious idea that's entered in, like when she's talking with this entity, there's some sort of connection with a deceased relative. In this case, it's her future deceased daughter. That's part of the storyline in Arrival. And yeah, let's see if I'm thinking if there's anything else along those lines. And then, okay, yeah, that's about it. For that.
I mean, I would say kind of with looking at how Interstellar is presenting this contact with these beings and some of these contact, like some of these present it as if it's a scientific presentation of what's happening. Like Interstellar is not. They don't prop it up as if like they're talking about occultism or anything. It's purely like supposed to be scientific. And we look at like the Thor movies and how they talk about how like, oh, Asgardian magic, it's not magic, it's just science. Like but you don't have this science yet. And like we're seeing this kind of some stuff that's being presented as scientific where it's just getting more and more ridiculous, and just like it's occult concepts that are being discussed as if they're scientific. Some of the stuff, like even with kind of like parallel universes and quantum mechanics, like some of that stuff gets so out there and so far from like what most of us think of as like legitimate science. And it's just this highly theoretical idea that like gets into how beings from other dimensions could try to contact us. And it's not demonic, it's just scientific. It's just they're just in another realm.
I remember like as a kid, and I saw this video several times, and maybe some people in the audience will remember this, but they gave us this video, and it's basically this guy who's into he's like a quantum scientist or whatever, and at first it starts off innocuous, and he's talking about like, for example, if you jump off a building and land on the ground, why don't you go bursting through the ground? And basically, there's this sort of force that holds the atoms together that's greater than the force of you touching the ground. So that's how you have solids or whatever. Just normal, interesting science. And then he's like, and he's just presenting what comes next as just facts like that. Like, and he just flows without changing his tone later into but then when you get into quantum, like deep quantum physics or whatever, things get really strange. Like there are parallel universes, and in one universe, like let's say I walk into a bar, one universe I might have a green drink, and in this universe I have like a blue drink, and in another universe, and there are infinite universes. And I was watching this like, you're not proving any of this. This has like, and like, where is this coming from? Like, and he's just describing of like, this is just what scientists know. There are parallel universes, and like, you just have to accept this. And this is like propaganda for kids in school.
And we see this exact idea in comic books, like this idea of there's a billion different like versions of the same universe, and so you've got every different possible iteration of like you've
Mm-hmm.
got Black Superman, and in that world like Flash is a woman, and like but then you've got like the evil Justice League in this other universe, and like it you have this exact idea. It's literal like comic book nonsense, but it's the same concept is presented to us as like top tier scientific theory. Like this is like the best of the best of what the, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and what they're saying now, and it does allow for. I hadn't really thought about like the importance of it, but it does allow for like them to kind of explain away these demonic entities as something lesser, as just like beings that have figured out how to cross dimensions. So it's just these highly advanced, brilliant scientific minds that are kind of more advanced than us and trying to show us how to advance to their level. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Yeah.
probably what that's really about.
And another thing is you're able, if you present it as instead of demonic as like scientific, is you can present it as arbitrary. And I remember, this reminds me, I didn't plan on bringing up this game, but I'm reminded of it. Skyrim, have you played that?
But yeah,
Okay.
you play as the
So,
Dragonborn.
yep. And magic in that game is, there's so many occult things that are just presented in the most arbitrary way possible, that there's um like yeah, this demonic entity is just like, you're just making this kind of like deal with him, and it's but like and they force you to do it. And the idea that I'll give an example. They they give you certain perspectives, but all of them don't consider Christian considerations. That Christian considerations is just something to be completely dismissed and not thought of. And for example, there's this when you have to enter into this like hellish world in one of the expansions. It was the vampire expansion,
Mm.
which had a lot of occult stuff. And you you work with this vampire companion, and she says, and that there are these overlords of this world, um, and they're anomalous entities again, and and you have to like make deals with them, and they watch over the souls there. And if a magician uses a black soul gem to enchant an item, then the soul is basically sold to these entities. And when you're about to enter into this portal to go there to this dimension, because you have to find her mom there or something. She says, okay, but the thing is that you have to be kind of dead to enter into this realm. And so there's two things that you can do. You're a vampire hunter, at least when I join. You're a vampire hunter, and she's like, so there's two things you can do to enter into this realm. You can give half your soul to these entities. So you give half your soul to them, and then it'll be kind of like you're half dead, and you can trick them into entering into the realm, into this dimension, or you can let me bite you, and you'll become a vampire. And vampires are technically dead. And then I decided, like, well, giving half of your soul to a demon is completely not acceptable, from my perspective. And so I guess I'll just let myself be bitten as a vampire. And she's like, but that's presented as the bad decision. She's like, but you're a vampire hunter. You're going against everything that you stand for. And it's like, wait, this is the dark, bad decision to become a vampire instead of offering part of your soul to demons. And so, anyways, and then so I let her bite me, which that itself is dark because
Yeah.
vampirism is invented. It was invented by a demon god in the game. And
Hmm.
so you're doing a demonic ritual anyways, but it's like, okay, better than offering your soul to these demonic entities. But Christian like objections are not even offered on the table for consideration. And then later in the game, it's a false choice. To complete the game, you have to lose your vampirism. And guess what you have to do to lose your vampirism? You have to go to this occult magician guy. You have to give him a black soul gem, which contains the soul of a human. And he offers this soul to these same entities. Um, and they in this ritual, this cures you of your vampirism, and you
Hmm.
become human again. So you have to offer a soul to these entities anyways. Either way, you have to do a demonic sacrifice to complete the campaign.
Huh. Yeah,
And
you have to be involved in a human sacrifice essentially, even if you don't see the human. Like it, that's like a soul in the stone essentially. So.
mhm, indeed. And I tried to like kill a bad guy and take his soul and then offer it, but still there's something not right about that. And let's see. Yeah, it's just presented as this kind of arbitrary contract, like you making a contract with another person. It's
Hmm.
presented as arbitrary as possible. And I remember I can't believe I did this. Like I'm a Christian, and this game has like something very clearly demonic. It's this box with like a skull on top of it, a, a demonic looking skull, and it's on top of embers. And there's this book, and it's like, so this is kind of like science. I don't know how this works, but you put something in the box and it goes into this other dimension, and then something else comes out, and you can experiment with it and mix and match different things you put in the box, and you can get something else out of it. And it's presented arbitrarily, just kind of like, you know, just experimenting with materials,
Hmm.
mix two things together and, see what happens or something. But it's very clearly demonic. And I can't believe that I actually simulated this in a video game.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to like play video games and not participate in some of this stuff because it's so prominent. Like I had mentioned to you earlier, Diablo, and what I wanted to mention from that series is particularly in the third game, maybe earlier, but in the third one they make it a very prominent thing that you are a Nephilim, and like yeah,
Mm.
that's the plot of the game is that you're a Nephilim and you're going out to fight, and only the Nephilim can actually defeat the the forces of evil, the demonic, and like
Mm.
yeah, I don't know, like there's so many, and that game is like not nearly as elegant in its propaganda as like Starcraft was, I would say. But you do just constantly have these concepts of joining with evil to defeat evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you have anything else on that, or do you want to jump to the next
Yeah,
one?
just something real quick. I remember like alteration magic. There are like, so I was doing alteration magic throughout the game, and then I read a book on alteration magic, and they're like, so with the guy is like, um, so there are these forces in the world. They might be conscious, they might not be. Um, but that's not of no concern for the alteration magician. The alteration magician doesn't worry about this. What he's concerned about is somehow persuading these forces that the world would be better if it were altered to his desires. And I'm like reading this like, wait, what do you mean it doesn't matter if these things are conscious or not? Like I've been doing alteration magic throughout this whole game, and I thought that was kind of funny. It's like, what do you mean it doesn't matter? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, stuff like that, it's like that's really dark if you think about the implications of it. And like they normalize these occult concepts of like, yeah, who cares if you have to sacrifice some people? The ends justify the means. Uh, and and yeah, so they normalize a lot of this like really deep thinking, or deep dark thinking. All right, so we're back. We just took a brief break there. And so next I'd like to jump into, you did a video where you talked about some of the imagery in Revelation, which gets into these sort of insectoids, and it's generally considered to be, it's talking about the demonic forces and how they're going to interact with the world in the end times. But there's some interesting imagery there, and that imagery is used in modern storytelling uh, quite prominently, it seems. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so now it's time to what is it? Now it's time to get really crazy.
Yeah.
For so folks ain't you ain't seen nothing yet. So I remember when this like crazy Pentecostal was and I don't think he had the right approach really, but he was talking to me about like the locust from the pit, and he took it really literally, and he was like, at the end times, there's going to be these locusts, and they're going to have they're a crown of on their head, and they're going to have the teeth of lions, and they're going to sting people and like tails of scorpions. And I was just like, I'm not going to engage with this guy on this topic. Um, I think it was like, okay, it's a highly symbolic, but this is really crazy. I've yeah, and some other people have pointed this out, that, and I started to catch on to it, that there are really incredible images of creatures that resemble these, and there's a narrative being played out very similar to with creatures that you see in the book of Revelation. I think a really interesting example, um, in Wreck-It Ralph, I thought that the cybugs really resembled them at first. Other people have pointed out they have the teeth of lions. And Wreck-It Ralph is just a horrible demonic movie. It's just disgusting, full of Gnosticism, all that stuff. But um, you have it's all about like Ralph embracing that he's a bad guy. You literally have Satan, and he's in the beginning, and he's like the Diablo character because
Mhm.
it's in a video game, and he's in therapy for bad guys, and Satan is just presented as the nicest guy, and like Satan's like you got it, Ralph, like cheer up, and like Ralph's like thanks, Satan, and he's presented as the nicest guy ever. But anyways, what was and I knew I had already thought that the cybugs really in that movie resembled the locusts from the pit. They have the teeth of lions. They come out of the ground, and then I thought King Candy, he has the face of a man when he's merged with the cybug. He has the face of a man, at times the teeth of lions, and he has a crown of gold on his head. And you can look up like the concept art for it, and it's crazy. And then there are a lot of parallels with this. And in the book of Revelation, it says that they will have, they'll have the teeth of lions, the something like a crown of gold on their head, and the face of a man, and the sound of their wings will be like the sound of chariots. And Gears of War is one of the more obvious examples of this, and they actually call the creatures the locust horde. They actually call them that, and what's amazing, and then there's the creature that's called the Tempest. You can look it up, and it literally has the face of a man, the teeth of lions, and a crown of gold and golden armor on its head that looks like a crown, and it has gigantic wings. And the locust horde, so the book of Revelation, it has these details like they will take people, they will sting people, and they will torment them for 5 months, a period of 5 months, and people will seek for death and not find it. And that is a huge part of the plot point of Gears of War, that they take people alive to a horrific fate to where they seek death. For example, there's this character Ty in Gears of War 2, and he's taken, and when you rescue him, the first thing he does, he's like in this bad state, just like he's just looks totally different, and he's like moaning and groaning, and then Marcus hands him a gun, like, okay, let's fight our way out of here, and he immediately shoots himself. So you have that detail of people seeking for death, not being able to find it. And then when Dom finds his wife, who had been captured by the locust horde, and he shoots his wife just because he can't, she's in a terrible state. And the locust horde, they come out of the ground, so it says that they come out of the bottomless pit. And you have this detail in the movie Alien. The alien creature has kind of the face of a man. If you look at some of the original designs, the top part is transparent, and you can see through it, and it's like a human skull behind it, and it has teeth that it shows, kind of like a lion, but it's insectoid at the same time, and it has the tail of a scorpion. And it has 4 protrusions on its back that have it gives the silhouette, the semblance of wings, and it doesn't have, it has 4 limbs like a horse does. And again, so this is a hidden part of the movie. They took it out, and I can only guess that this is, it's kind of like something for the more initiated, the serious people to see. In the director's cut, you see that the creature had taken the people alive, and when Ripley finds them on her way out, one of the guys is being absorbed into the wall of this. The crew is being transformed into eggs, and this is the life cycle of the alien. So you don't even know, like, the key component of this movie, unless if you watch the director's cut, watch it very seriously, and get the details. But one of the guys is still alive, and he moans, "Kill me." So seeking for death, not being able to find it, Ripley kills him.
And wasn't the alien, it was specifically created by an occultist, I believe you said, and he got the imagery for it from his dreams about hell.
Oh yeah. So the alien was designed by H.R. Geiger, and just some of H.R. Geiger's work, do not look it up. It's really bad. But just don't let your curiosity get the better of you on this one, to the audience. I just recommend. But his art, like, he has a demon, aiming a slingshot at the viewer, but the slingshot is a crucifix, and so that shows the mind of H.R. Geiger. And he has, like, dead babies and just pornographic demon stuff from hell, and he has the Baphomet, a version of the Baphomet, and also he said he, like, took drugs and stuff, and he had nightmares of the underworld, and this is what inspired his art. And he designed the alien creature, and the alien creature is also supposed to be, if you just look on the Wikipedia page, it's pretty amazing, like, how we just kind of glance over stuff, we gloss over it, we don't think about it too much. And but the alien creature is supposed to be like a creature that, one of the core things is that it, like, rapes people. And if you look on the Wikipedia page, they just discuss this openly, like yeah, this is what the story is all about. It's about an alien that rapes people and kills them horrifically. And you see that in the film a bit, and also in the creature's design. And so this is really like, it's funny how popular these movies are, but they're so horrific.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and then just to go off on this more, the Locust from the Pit, you have in Starcraft, back in Starcraft, the Zerg have, a lot of the creatures have, if you look at some of the concept art, it's more clear, but they have tails of scorpions sometimes. The giant wings, they're insects, right? But they're also kind of animal. They have teeth like lions. Isn't that interesting? And but they have insect wings, and so, and there's this narrative where, like, the false flag event where Minx unleashes this on humanity. There's always this narrative of them invading someplace, and they take people alive. I remember there's several scenes where someone says, like, someone who's been Zerg infested, he's still partly there, and he says, "Kill me." He begs you to kill him. This happens several times in the Starcraft series. So again, seeking death, not being able to find it. And then there's this narrative of the aliens rescuing us, the more spiritual aliens rescuing us, like the Protoss. They come down and they want to destroy the Zerg, and they are shown as having some compassion for us. And they do this by firing giant beams from their ships, which I find it very interesting, because in Gears of War, that's how they defeat the Locust Horde. That's how they hold them back and put them in check, so that they don't get completely overrun. They fire giant beams down from the sky, from these satellites, and that's what let's see, you have in Halo, the Flood. They do the same thing. They take Captain Keyes alive, and he groans to you over the radio as he's being absorbed into the Flood. And Halo 3, there's this really interesting scene. Again, it doesn't have to logically make sense. It's just, the subconscious, you get a few ideas into your head. And Cortana, the ghost of Cortana, she's narrating these random things throughout the Halo 3. And this is kind of interesting. She says, "This is the way the world ends." And then this giant portal opens up. A few things happen. So this giant portal opens up, and then just randomly this flood-infested ship appears, and they just start wrecking all the humans in the vicinity. And some of the pure flood forms have the semblance of an insectoid appearance. And then, then the elites come down. Now they're the good guys. At first, they're kind of bad, but now we learn that they're good guys, and they come down to rescue us. And so you have these gray aliens who practice some sort of spirituality, come down. They have kind of these bipedal hind legs, kind of like the archetypical physiology of a demon. They have two hooves, and they are much more effective at fighting the Flood than humans are. And they again fire giant beams down from their ships. You have this again in Half-Life. I just was watching Half-Life 2, episode 3, episode 2, Half-Life 2, episode 2 maybe, and the beginning of it, a giant portal opens up, and then you have to fight these antlions. They're bug aliens that they, but unlike insects, they have 4 limbs. They have the teeth of lions. They crawl out of the ground, and you're about to be overrun by them in this mission. But then the Vortigons, these aliens with hooves, bipedal hind legs, they come out of portals. They show up and they come to the rescue, and they're very effective at fighting them, and they come and save the day. And they come out of portals in the first Half-Life, just like the Protoss. They're all the Protoss, how their system works is they come out of portals, and like the excuse is that they need to be portaled down from a mothership. So the base, like a portal's open up and the Protoss building comes out, and then this building opens a portal that the Protoss units come out of. And it reminds me, I came across something where there was a high-level cultist who became a Christian. He had been born into like an occult group, and he said that he had learned that there's a ton of human sacrifice going on and trying to open up portals, and out of these portals are going to come demons openly. They're going to come out openly on the world, but they're not going to present themselves as demons. They're going to present themselves as aliens and higher beings of light, and they're coming to save us. So you have Vortigaunts, the good aliens. At first, they're presented as hostile, but eventually they're just misunderstood. They're enslaved. They can't help it. So, and then they end up being the good guys. The elites, at first, they're presented kind of as enemies, but then they're the good guys. And again, you see this narrative in the Metro games. You have the others. They're these dark entities with bipedal hind legs. They have kind of the semblance of an alien, especially the Metro Last Light, the little creature, the little dark one. And at first they're hostile. Your mission is to destroy them. But you learn that they're actually just misunderstood, and they're trying to help you out. And there's another creature in the Metro games called the spider bugs, and they have but unlike bugs, they have teeth of lions. They have teeth. Unlike an insect with 6 legs, they have 4 legs like a horse. They take people alive. Their head is kind of crowned. It curls up. They're sort of exoskeleton, and it's like they're spray painted gold on the top. And they have the tail of a scorpion. And the dark ones they end up being good guys, and they're trying to help us fight, these other entities in the Metro games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we look at just generally at occultism, it does seem that a lot of the the higher ritual is about opening up gateways for the demonic to enter into our world. You've got, or even like directly bringing about the apocalypse. Like, you've got like the Babylon Working, which was a ritual written by Aleister Crowley, and it was performed by L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons, one of the key NASA guys. And yeah, so it seems like a lot of these rituals that are taking place is about this concept of like opening portals to the demonic, allowing the demonic to come into our world. Yeah, and it's hard to know what to make of all of this imagery. It's being portrayed as a very literal thing. I don't know if we're supposed to view this
wild.
This imagery in Revelation as literal or if it's more figurative. But it's very interesting to see how this biblical imagery is being portrayed by these occultists in these propaganda set pieces.
Yep. And they're giving us different interpretations of how to see these things other than the Bible. So we have we have other ideas, like they're not what is it? They're not demonic creatures. They're aliens. And then Starship Troopers, again, they take people alive. They have stingers. They fly, and they take people alive to a horrific fate that's worse than death. They come out from underground. That's the deal with these bug aliens. And I'm going more kind of with the literal now. It's funny. I used to be an atheist. I used to think everything's arbitrary, and now it's like, no, the world's really crazy, and it's about to blow up in our face, maybe.
I mean, we do have like literal demonic infestation of the earth, it seems like, with the Nephilim, with what happened back in Genesis 6. And then, I believe it says in prophecy that things are going to be worse than the time before the flood. And so like if you take why did the flood get so bad? Why did it get so bad before the flood? It was because of the demonic infestation and then influence on humanity. So it's like, yeah, perhaps there will be a more literal comeback of the demonic. I don't know.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is very crazy stuff.
And then just to throw some more stuff in there, you see this is the huge main plot of Men in Black. You have the alien antagonist turns out to be a giant insectoid, and it has a stinger tail like a scorpion, especially if you look in the concept art. In the cafe scene, he kills someone with a stinger, and he has teeth. It has teeth, uh, which is interesting. So it has kind of the face of a man with eyes. It has a face, and it has teeth like a lion. And then it takes people alive, as in it's just this random scene. If you don't know, if you don't see the connections, it just seems kind of random. Like Tommy Lee Jones's character, somehow he has this knowledge of like that he won't die, and he tells the creature, "Eat me." He says, eat me," and then it eats him alive, eats him whole, and swallows him whole. And I remember I was looking. So you remember Gears of War, and I remember I was going to check out the sequels to see the imagery, to see if they continued with this locust from the pit. And I was kind of like wondering, like, am I just taking things too far? It seems kind of crazy. And then I saw the creature designs, and it just like they doubled down. I was like, I was astounded. I was like, I was shocked. I was like, are you kidding me? So they have this four-legged creature with the teeth of a lion, and it literally has a giant scorpion tail, and it literally swallows people whole and carries them off alive, just like in Men in Black. And um, and in the new Gears of War series, they're more going with what at first it was like a slavery thing. They'd process you like a concentration camp, but now they're going more with an organic processing where people seek death and not find it, kind of like the Alien series, um, and Starcraft and Halo with the Flood do, where people are being absorbed organically into something.
Hmm.
And then so that's Men in Black. And then another thing I want to touch on again. So sometimes these things are presented as insectoid and sometimes as reptilian. Like in the movie or the TV series V, which that ties in with the Fifth Age. The alien creatures, they kind of have a humanoid appearance, which is it's kind of interesting how the in Men in Black it's described, it's covered as a human similarly, and then also in Gears of War, most of the Locust Horde are humanoid, and then in V there are these the aliens that they have a human face like as a covering, but they're actually a mix of reptilian and insectoid. They have the stinger tail, and then they have the teeth of lions. And you could look at their anatomy. It's pretty interesting. It looks like basically a, an ant inside of the perfect mix of reptilian and insectoid. And then in the movie Raka, it's a short film by the maker of District 9. And there are these reptilian aliens that do horrible things to people, and Earth's on its last leg. And then they take people alive to a fate, quote, worse than hell. And then but then there's hope because there's these angelic spiritual beings that come along, quote, like the rays of the aurora borealis, like a biblical salvation. And there's this guy, he like had gotten in a car wreck and he's like sees something in front of him, he's about to kill himself, but then he sees that like, oh wait, this seems like something good, and it's like this angelic being that's coming as like a spiritual, like kind of like salvation. And it suggests that these are going to help fight the reptilian primal aliens. And it's funny, it kind of just totally reminds me of the Bible saying that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. And when we look, there was, I think it was President Reagan, but one of the presidents has like said basically that, you know, a way that we can unite the people of the world is an alien, and is if an alien invasion came. And
Mm.
we see this concept also in The Watchmen. The villain
Yep.
stages a alien invasion and uses that to try to unite the people under kind of a one world government. Um,
Happens in Arrival. Um, and the big, and then do you know Childhood's End?
no,
Oh man, do you know the scariest movie ever by KJ Osborne?
nope.
That's a good channel. Let's see. Oh man, Childhood's End is insane. Oh guys, so you have to look up scariest movie ever, Childhood's End. That is a must see. It's a big. It's a must see on my watch. So it's based on a book by Arthur C. Clarke, guy who made 2001: A Space Odyssey, and these giant ships show up in the sky, and they start solving all the world's problems. They end all the wars, cure all the diseases, everyone has food, etc. And then the world kind of unites. And then since all the problems are solved, like the Christians, all the people of faith, they can't handle this because it just destroys their worldview. So all the Christians commit suicide.
Hmm.
They can't take it. And then so this goes on for a few years, and then no one knows what these aliens look like. They're up in their ships, and there's this world leader, and he's like an intermediary between these beings and humanity. And then after like 10 years, they say, you're not ready to see what we look like yet. But after 10 years, they finally come down on their ship. We're going to see what they look like. And they come down, and the doors open. And then what comes out has red skin, hooves, giant bat wings, giant horns. It's exactly like the devil.
Wow.
And then everyone sees it, and they're like shocked, like, oh. And the and then it turns out that these beings are like deceptive, and how they play it off, like some of the characters of course are wondering, like, how did they look like our understanding of a demon, and like did they have contact with our race before, and it's the aliens say, well, no, what happened is your species had a premonition uh, of us and what we would do to humanity, and because what they end up doing is a lot of undesirable things like ending all culture and all that stuff. And then they also trick them, and they say, this is the end of your race. You're going to have no more children. We're taking all your children to like an island, and we're going to leave, and your species is just going to everyone's eventually going to die because they're not going to have any more children. They're going to grow old, and the world kind of dissolves into chaos. And I think, and then all the children were brought to this island on Earth in the book, and then these aliens, what they do is they go from planet to planet, and they bring species into this sort of monad figure, kind of like a Buddhist idea. Everyone joins Brahman, and they're helping humanity to ascend to that next level. So all the children are they're in this meditative state, and they are humanity's Earth is just wiped out, and they join this higher force. So, anyways, crazy.
That's crazy, especially considering like I knew 2001 was like a propaganda piece, but like hearing about that by the same author, like
Mm-hmm.
that just like really makes it like explicit like what he's doing with these stories. It's like he's really trying to shape our view of the things to come. It's really
And
interesting.
they're presented as, not KJ Osborne, the scariest movie ever. When he breaks down this movie, he makes this point. They're not presented as malicious. They're kind of nice. They're kind of benevolent, and uh,
Mhm.
anyways, pretty interesting. And I remember I was reading. So I was a, a a volunteer English teacher, and these books, like I was working in a public school, and these books, they have like propaganda in them. And it's interesting how you think like English textbook curriculum could be an opportunity to spread ideas throughout the world. And I've seen some crazy stuff. Like I saw this workbook saying like Nero is actually a good guy. He and he improved the streets of Rome, and he tried to help people after the fire. And some people blame the fire on Nero because they didn't like him.
Mhm.
It's like I'm like reading this. I'm like, okay, everyone, I have to tell you the real story now of Nero. And then uh, and I remember I uh, I had broken some of this stuff to some kids in a certain grade, maybe by Providence. It was interesting. I just hung out with them after school, and uh, talked about this movie. And then in class, the the class was the textbook chapter. It was on the theme was aliens, and it was there was like an article saying, we now know that there's life out there because the universe is so big, and just like all these billions of stars. Like we now know that life had to arise. There has to be intelligent life out there, and then it
Because
asks
there
like,
has to be statistically based on our worldview.
yeah, and it says, what do you think these aliens will look like? Like, do you think we'll come in contact with them? And then the workbook exercises it's about like UFOs and alien sightings, and then and this two kids that I had shared this with, they were kind of smirking throughout the class. And it basically says, what do you think? And again, Christianity is just dismissed as something not to even be considered or thought of. It's just, that's just, it's completely to be out of mind. And of course, it's not really compatible with Christianity because we have the Incarnation. And then so one of the kids who were smirking, they raised their hand and said, so James, what do you think about this? And I was like, I basically told the class, I was like, so guys, you want to know what I think about this? Like, does this, I said, what does this assume? This assumes that life is an accident, and that, of course, this accident would happen elsewhere. And I said, do we think that we are here by accident? Do we think that? And that was kind of an interesting, like the class was like, okay, that's an interesting point. And then I basically broke to them all about, what is it? I was like, well, let me tell you about this book by Arthur C. Clarke. I just broke. They were just like, whoa. And I said, and you all know, this was in Georgia. And I said, you all know St. Gabriel of Georgia. This is what he said about this. That was kind of interesting, taking that opportunity to discuss that propaganda in this English book.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. I mean, I thought about becoming a teacher myself, and it's just like I didn't want to get into that world with all you have to deal with, and how hard it can be to talk about things like the things that you should be talking to about kids these days. You're just not allowed to talk about in most schools, and like, so it's encouraging to hear that you were, we got a based Christian teacher, helping the kids out there.
Indeed. And it was funny, like one girl was like looking at me the whole time like, are you insane? And then but then also I asked, like, after, I was like, so did you find that interesting? And then like one kid was like, yes. So that was encouraging.
Yeah. Awesome. Something else I wanted to talk about is the concept of the chosen one. I think I'm going to do a video on this topic because it shows up in so many stories. We've got it in Star Wars. The chosen one's supposed to be Anakin or potentially Luke now, according to Disney. You've got Harry Potter, who's got the prophecy of the chosen one. It seems like most of the like really big stories these days seem to have this concept involved in them. And I was having a discussion in the Discord with one of the guys about Tolkien. And it's so interesting to compare what Tolkien was doing with fantasy versus what most modern fantasy does with this chosen one concept. Because Tolkien, it's all about the fact that you're not the chosen one, and like you can't be the chosen one, and like if you were, you would be corrupt. Is basically like kind of one of the key points of Lord of the Rings is like if this ring of power corrupts everyone that gets it, and we see all these different heroic figures imagining themselves, well, if just I had it, if just I had all the power, I could probably fix things. Like, and even Samwise, sees himself like as the heroic figure if he had the ring, and like it's all about the opposite of the modern storytelling that we have now, which is like, no, you can become the lone hero. Like if you become this like mystical occult figure, you can become a Christ type figure yourself. You can become an antichrist, I would say, is essentially the message that's being pushed on us, that you can ascend into the higher being and do what is right. I just thought it was so interesting to compare where the fantasy genre came from, which largely like Tolkien and Lewis, who were talking about like all these deep concepts, like often which just goes over the head of most people. But these guys, seemed to really get a lot of what was going on with the world, and even with like the occult and some of the darker influences on us. But they weren't. They were very subtle about how they taught, how they spoke about these things. But like the messages that we get from their stories versus modern stories is very different.
Hmm.
Um,
And another book that gets into kind of conspiracies is the last Narnia book, The Last Battle. It's about the apocalypse, and it talks about all the different levels of subtlety of lies that are going to happen in the apocalypse to deceive people. It was a very interesting read. I remember reading it as I am now, with the knowledge I have now.
mhm.
And what you said, I have noticed that for sure, and I don't have too much to comment on it. Yeah, it does seem like an antichrist, figure, messianic figure being propped up, and then, but it did remind me of a commercial I saw that was just pretty interesting. So it was I was just watching a commercial. It was I remember there was a commercial that stuck with me. It was a Tinkerbell movie, I think, that was being advertised, and this is aimed at children, and it's talking about everyone's worried about this prophesied thing that's coming, and then this thing comes out of the sky, and it's this like little monster creature, and then one of the fairies goes and finds it and meets it, and it's actually like a cute, nice creature, and and it's misunderstood, and then you see in this commercial the fairy overlords are talking about like the prophecy's coming, this creature's coming, and then this hero is kind of trying to suggest like, well, maybe this beast, because she knows that the beast is actually really nice and cute and friendly, and he's like, maybe this beast is just different and misunderstood, and maybe it's not all that bad, even though the prophecy says it's coming. Yeah, the prophecy says it's coming. Maybe it's coming, but maybe it won't be bad. Maybe that part of the prophecy is wrong, and you can see the I was just like, wow, that's crazy. Like thinking, because we have these prophecies about certain figures coming, like the Antichrist, the beast, and all that stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe some of that prophecy is true, like this is coming, but maybe it's not all that bad. And
Mhm.
uh, I remember that in a child's movie. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're commonly trying to twist how we view the prophecy of the Bible, and we can look at like potentially. It'd be interesting to do a deep dive, just comparing the prophecy of the pagan myths to the prophecies of the Bible, and kind of how they talk about the same events. Because if you view all of if you view like the occult and like what's going on in our world as essentially like Satan's master plan throughout history, like he would have been he would have had long-term plans for how to manipulate all of history. I mean, he's not omniscient like God, but he would still have long-term historical plans. He's not just flying off the cuff. So I would imagine that he's built into the various pagan religions the this same Masonic religion that we're seeing it now, and that's kind of built into the religions that they're supposed to uh, that they all are one. And so you have some of these concepts throughout them that I think do link them, that are built into the religions from these entities from the beginning. Um, and so now we have like the Masons trying to push this concept that all these religions are the same thing, and Satan has actually built that. Like, there's no reason that he wouldn't have actually built that into these various pagan myths. Um, like,
by the way, I did just want to say, what if I think maybe 2 hours would be a good cutoff point
yeah,
if we reach that. So maybe another set. What is it? 17 minutes, and then maybe we can have this show another time if people want it, and
hmm
that's always an option.
yeah.
So yeah, just I think that's a good time, so won't exhaust people too much. But uh, on that note, did you happen to know the YouTube channel What is Real?
No.
man, you would have liked that guy. He wasn't a Christian, unfortunately, but he did have sympathies to it, and he he was, I think, basically the most talented breakdown guy who broke down movies, and he could only go so far without Christianity, but he broke down some stuff really well, um, and he liked skateboarding. I think you really would have liked him. And he complained about how it's all about Monster Energy drinks, and he used to be into skateboarding, and he's like really upset about how this, occultists basically are poisoning us with the food industry, um,
Yeah.
and he got really into Prometheus mythology, and how so Prometheus is the hero who stole the fire from the gods. He's got the gift of knowledge, and occultists see the serpent in the Garden of Eden kind of like Prometheus. It's this hero who takes this knowledge from God, and the fruit is like the flame. And in 2001: Space Odyssey, it's basically, that's the story. There's the obelisk is like a gift, and it's the gift of knowledge. And the monkeys, they touch it, and they learn that they get the knowledge of that, it's artificial, and they learn about how to advance. And this involves killing the other, let's see, monkey people. So they learn how to basically get tools to kill, other people, and this causes advancement. So that's again demonic, like teaching us evil, kind of in a sense. But this helps it. It's part of just advancement. It's part of evolution. And then let's see. It's funny because the black obelisk thing, it is the screen. It's the black screen, which we have on our Apple iPhones now. It's kind of interesting because now we touch these things, and there was a commercial that came out that was pretty fun. It was kind of funny, and it had basically an iPhone in the place in that scene of the 2001, and they're all touching a phone, and we're all touching these screens with the bitten apple. And did you have?
Oh wow!
And we're gaining this knowledge, and along with it, we're learning all sorts of perversion and getting manipulated in all sorts of ways, unlike ever before. The people who invented the screen also were occultists, and it's like a black scrying mirror. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's something I heard. And then and the original Apple One computer, the Apple One, do you know what price it sold for?
$666.
And 66 cents.
Really? Wow.
Yep. And Steve Jobs was like, oh yeah, I didn't know about the mark of the beast. I like consistency, and we didn't want to go quite as expensive as 700, and like I just thought a bunch of numbers in a row would look nice, and like
that you did.
Yeah. And it also now that it also has the look of a gray alien, kind of. If you like, the leaf is the eye, and the bitten part is like a shoulder, so it's like a silhouette of an alien if you get two of them together. Some people have pointed this out, and they've had a commercial where they changed the Apple emblem into the alien emoji, and the alien emoji winks, so you have that demonic tie-in. And then I saw there's a company called Prometheus, and I saw this in a classroom. In one of the classrooms, they have like an advanced classroom in one of my schools that I taught at. And I was looking at them, and instead of the apple, they have the Prometheus flame for their emblem. And it's like a classroom technology company where they have tablets for each of the desks, and they have like a touch screen of the front presentation thing. And so I thought that was very interesting tie-in, and that was something that What Is Real talked about a lot. And I was crazy. I can't believe the education I've received. Like, I watched all of his videos, and he didn't like publicity too much, and I think, and he went off the public scene, and he deleted all his videos. So now they're all gone. But I watched all of them. It's crazy. And so yeah, there was that.
I would say on Prometheus, like, that's, I think, the best way to explain occultism is their view of Prometheus. It's like they equate Lucifer to Prometheus. It's all about like stealing the knowledge of the gods and giving it to man, and this is a good thing, and that is essentially acceptance of the lie in the garden that you can be as gods. And like that is really the way to boil down all occultism. It's all connected to this idea of worshiping this knowledge that was not meant uh, not meant for us.
Mhm.
Not We're not meant to be like in charge of right and wrong, and but it's
Indeed.
all about the acceptance of that lie. I had seen like that it's the bit in Apple for the Apple logo, but like man, that is really crazy to think about when you think about how big tech is tied into all of this, and
Hmm.
really so blatant with the symbolism if you just consider it. Uh, uh,
Yeah,
it's crazy stuff.
indeed. And then yeah, this Prometheus thing. There are a few other instances of it. You see it in like in Batman versus Superman. Superman kind of represents a god figure, and how can you defeat him? And Batman, what his real point is out. He's rising from the Batmobile and it's flaming. This is this kind of a reference to the fire of Prometheus, and this is technology. The fire of Prometheus is technology, a certain advancement, and um, and then another instance of it. Um, let's see. Uh, I kind of forgot. Okay. Anyways, yeah, but so the person who made Raqqa and so he made Raqqa and the alien film I talked about with the reptile aliens, and
Hmm.
then he also made District 9. He made another short film besides Raqqa, and it was called God, and I wish I didn't watch it because of course, it's extremely blasphemous. But it shows God like an old man sitting in an armchair, and he has this table set out, and it's basically Earth, um, and there are these little people, that, very small, and and then there's this butler figure, so it's like a helper to God, and this and the butler figure points out and he says, "Oh, hey God, look, your humans have fire now. Like, isn't that cool?" And then he God like freaks out and he's like, "Who told them that they could have fire?" He's like, "I'm the one who gives fire," and he says, "Snuff them out." And so he's trying to make you scared of God. It sounds like snuff them out, like. So is he telling the butler to kill them? And then the butler tries to very carefully, blows very softly, and so he saves them from God by sort of obeying the orders, but he just blows out the fire,
Hmm.
and then God eventually has them killed and just portrayed as this villain. And Lucifer's trying to help us out. He's this figure, and um,
Is that Neil Blomkamp? Is that the director?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But and then SpongeBob had this mythology portrayed, which had the primal. It's like the early, like they have fangs. They're primal SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick. Like they have long canines and they're cavemen characters. And yeah, SpongeBob, like he gets the knowledge of fire. There's another scene. SpongeBob's crazy with occultism. They have there's this one there's this one episode I saw. The first season is crazy. He gets like a staff of the gods, and he becomes and then he dresses up in a Greek robe, and he has this power, and he goes around trying to help people, but he ends up but incidentally he ends up causing problems because he has something more powerful than he knows what to deal with. I thought that was very interesting. You have some kind of philosophical stuff going on there with mythology and whatnot. And since I'm on SpongeBob, I did want to get this across because it was crazy, and I haven't seen it broken down this much. Have you heard of lesser magic by chance?
A book or
It's a concept. KJ Osborne, Scariest Movie Ever, that guy, he talks about it. And an example he gave that I thought was effective is that somehow, if you present an image to a audience of a bunch of people, get something out in the mass consciousness, it has a real world effect. An example that I think is great is that there was an occult, like the coaches or the team owners of a certain baseball team, they weren't doing so well, and so they thought it was time to break out the magic. So in the middle of the game, they flashed like the screen with a bunch of occult symbols at one moment. It's too quick to notice, but if you go back in the recording, you can find it. And they said, yeah, we had decided to cast this spell to do this, and then for some reason, flashing that and getting something in the consciousness of the audience, they were able to win the game because of this, and it worked. And and so there's this idea of, if you present certain ideas, even if they're just presented to the subconscious of people, it somehow has some real world effect. And in SpongeBob, of course, there's the this isn't too big of a conspiracy theory, but yeah, his nose is phallic. And Squidward's is interesting. It's deflated, and it's accentuated by the fact that it's so fat, and he has a nasally voice like this. So it's trying to promote insanity, the insanity of SpongeBob, and downplay normal and deflate the normalcy in society. Like Squidward's just a normal guy who wants to be left alone, and and it's trying to deflate this and promote insanity, and also kind of like, I guess this is some sort of sex magic thing. But then also at the beginning of each episode, SpongeBob, he plays his nose. So he's using this magical, image, and he plays it like a flute. And is like, that's totally the Pied Piper leading the children away. And in one episode, I remember I saw he was trying to solve this problem. There's like a worm infested place, and he had this idea. He's like, oh wait, and he like plays his nose, and then he gets all the worms to march after him and lead them out of this place. And it was like, when I saw that, I was like, confirmation, like totally confirmed. And yeah, so SpongeBob's pretty interesting, and there's also psychology stuff, like with the id and all that stuff in the movies, and which I find really boring, like, because it's just not a correct understanding of how the world works. And then one of the movies, like the squirrel's gone crazy. What's her name? Sally or something?
I don't know.
Sandra.
She's got a space helmet on all the time.
Yeah. So the apocalypse has happened because they've lost the Krabby Patty, so the world goes crazy. They've lost the Krabby Patty recipe, and SpongeBob is going throughout the post-apocalyptic world. He escaped, but now he's going throughout the post-apocalyptic world, and everyone's gone crazy because they can't have Krabby Patties anymore. And then he goes to the squirrel's house, and she's like becomes some dark occultist trying to figure out. She's like, the higher entities are angry with us because we need to find some way to appease them. And she has like all these writings everywhere, and then she has like a door frame with candles all over it, like opening like some like portals or something. And it's like, wow, that's crazy, especially the door with the candles on it. And yeah, for a kids movie.
Have you seen there's a clip of Tom and Jerry, and it's like they get called into like,
oh yeah,
some Hollywood executive's office, and they're like talking to him, and the guy he's got like a little like pyramid sitting on his desk, and he's like, all right, we need to contact the president of Hollywood. And he and his little buddy put on like these little like pyramid hats, and then they like do some like occult ceremony, and this figure, they like summon up a demon, and it's like this black shadowy figure, and it's clearly meant to be Satan, and they're calling him the president of Hollywood, and they like bow down to him, and they're like, and it's just in a kids show, and like I don't remember what he directs them to do, but it's crazy seeing, like, there's also in SpongeBob, there's just like a random scene in one of the episodes where there's just an Illuminati pyramid with an all-seeing eye sitting on some shelf, and you often see those kind of like little shout out, just like it doesn't seem built into the story even.
Hmm.
But it's just kind of like little Masonic shout outs in these kids shows. But like, yeah, I'm sure it goes much deeper than that. Like some of these examples you're talking about, where they actually are philosophically trying to manipulate children. Um, it's not just these little shout outs and like that stuff with the Tom and Jerry one. That's not just like a little symbolic joke. Like they're straight up just telling kids like Hollywood is run by Satan. And I guess I'll one of
Hmm.
the last things I'll mention is like we do have the occult principle of the revelation of the method, which is like an alchemical principle that basically your magic becomes stronger through revealing it to the world as you're doing it
Yeah.
in some way.
Yep.
Uh,
That's like lesser magic, I think. Yeah.
yeah, it's that same concept of kind of by putting the audience by showing giving us the chance to see what's really going on and then us ignoring it. It's like
Hmm.
it gives them more power in a very literal sense in that
Yeah.
they're just rubbing it in our face, but they believe at least that there's like an actual magical power to that as
Hmm.
well. um
And by the way, I did say that that I kind of wanted to end around here, but I did have maybe one more thing I wanted to mention just because I think it's important. I haven't done a piece on it. Maybe I will in the future, but since I haven't done a piece on it, I just want to get it out there.
mhm.
Um, that's the Lego movie. So in the Lego movie, there's again what I mentioned earlier. There's chaos and order. President Business, he's all about order. Um, so Wild Style, I think her real name ends up being like Lucy or something, which is kind of interesting. But she tells Emmett, this chosen one, what the world's like really about, and she's like, so President Business, he got confused by all the chaos, and so he erected walls between the worlds and wanted to, and that shows this giant wall coming up, which President Business, Donald Trump, he wants to build the wall, um, and and then Emmett is more, he has this power of um, chaotically building to counter President Business's order, and President Business is his tyrant. And it turns out that this Lego world is in a basement. And there's two dimensions. There's the Lego world where they have the real world, and they talk about the man upstairs, and then the man upstairs is of course a reference to God, and the creator of this Lego world, and then when they say that, Will Ferrell walks down the steps into the basement. So the man upstairs is kind of funny,
Mhm.
and he has this fat red tie. He's dressed like a businessman, and like Donald Trump has a fat red tie, and he and he's obsessed with perfection, and he wants to super glue all the Lego pieces so that everything's in perfect order. But the son is more of a free spirit, and he wants to create all these chaotic creations. And these two characters in the Lego world, they're sort of like incarnations of the gods, of the man upstairs and his son Emmett, or and the son who's more chaotic. So you have that imaginary world. But the point is that I want to get across is that so God is the bad guy, President Business is the bad guy, and the President Business represents God, and uh, so that's conveying that uh, Donald Trump represents kind of Christianity in the right. He's been propped up as this figure to kind of represent it and to villainize it. So this isn't about politics, Donald Trump's thing, and it really frustrates me when I see people. They're like these kind of liberals, and they're like, uh, the right's being manipulated, and it's like, yeah, to some extent with Trump, but who's really being manipulated more? Who's more of the bad guy? Like there's this in KJ Osborne, scariest movie ever. He's mentioned that uh, it's not so much Donald Trump they're attacking, like all these beheading pictures of him, and it's more of an idea that it represents. Anything that you'll see also all these articles talking about how much of a Christian Donald Trump is, supposedly. But the idea is there, no matter how much it resembles truth, that's what's being sold.
Mhm.
And then you have all this hatred being channeled towards that idea. And you even had that predicted in the Lego movie before. And then in the end, the son hugs the father, so you have the uniting of chaos and order. And Emmett and President Business also unite at that moment, and then everyone is saved, and you learn that chaos is okay, and you don't have to follow the instruction book.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
they get that.
I've thought about how it seems like the purpose of Trump is to further division amongst us, and like thinking about it on that level is very interesting. That like he's being propped up as like as if he's like representative of Christianity and conservatism, which he's anything but either of those
Yeah.
things. Um, but he's being propped up as like the top example of that, and like that's further pushing the left away from uh, these things when it's like it's legit to hate on Trump. He's a terrible guy, pretty obviously, I would say,
Mhm.
but to reject entirely Christianity and conservatism due to this false representative of it is ridiculous. But
Mhm.
that's what's happening. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. Well, this has been a really great talk. It's fun to just kind of free
Indeed.
flow talk about storytelling and propaganda because this is one of my favorite topics. So yeah, maybe we can do this again or talk about some other topics. I like just having like a free flow conversation like this. So um, if you
Awesome,
want to
man.
check out his content, it's narrative spirituality, right?
Yep.
Um, he's got a blog, so you can check that out. He doesn't have too many articles yet on his site. He hasn't been actively doing that, but I really liked seeing what James had to present, and so it's fun to dig into these things. And do you think you'll be working on your website more, putting out more stuff there?
Yeah, I have an idea for like another article or two. So as long as I have ideas, something to write on, maybe we'll see.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
awesome. Well, it's been good chatting with you, and maybe we can do this again sometime. So,
yeah, man, it's been good. Thanks for having me on again, and take care.
yeah, you have a good night.
Thanks.